I was watching this film today. Oh, I had a picture of the name of the film. It's an old film with Paul Newman and the person that became his wife, Vivian. Is it Vivian? Well, anyway, the lady in this, I'll show you in a minute, is his wife. Well, was his wife, because I think he's dead now. But what it was is I just saw it, and I keep seeing it in the films. Maybe nobody's noticed it before, but what I'm going to tell you is that everybody thinks that CGI and AI and all that is a very modern thing, but it isn't. It's been going on for quite a while, maybe a few good 100 years, yeah? And so even though they've told you that photography and films only started, you know, and they evolved so quickly from non-speaking to speaking footage and all this kind of stuff, this film was made, I think, probably in the 30s or 40s. So we're talking nearly 100 years ago, and they had it then because Paul Newman, whose face that is not standing in front of that person. So do you see here? What it is this is on my television. That's my television there. It's almost as if he is standing in front of him on a screen. Anyway, also you never see their noses. You just see this. Shall we, let's zoom in a little bit. It's actually hard to see which way he's looking because that eye is looking across there and this eye looks almost straight on, so it's a little bit difficult to see what he's actually looking at. But when we come over here, there, that is supposed to be Paul Newman. That bit doesn't look right, does it, at all? And he's got no nose. Do you see that? Does not look right. I hope that you can see what I'm seeing. I hope that once you see what I'm seeing, you will see it in all the films you watch. All the new ones are the same. Just the same as this. So it's like he's on a screen. I don't know how they do it, but he is superimposed in. Well, he is superimposed in, doesn't matter which way around, or they're both superimposed in. Anyway, let's put the video on. Because I took a few photographs, because it just kind of... So, do you see the person on the left? He's not talking to him. Not in reality. So there he is. Do you see the line round his face? He is superimposed into the footage. He has no nose. He's not in front of him. They are in different perspectives. Do you see that? Do you see that they are in different perspectives? Yes, let's move on. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. It is filmed off my television, and sometimes when you use a phone on a television or a screen it makes these lines across it, so I'm sorry about that, but look, he's not looking at him. He's a bit more over here and bigger, but he is not looking at him. He's looking over there. Again, these people are not together. Look, this bit is all blurred, that bit isn't. He's blurry. You can't really see his nose. You can't see his nose, and that's supposed to be his eye. But he's blurry compared to him. That cannot happen. Again, the other way round. He is not with him when they are filming this. They've stuck his head, someone's head in. So that is his head blown up. That looks all a bit weird, but there is the line round there. What, he's got all this light on him and you can't see any features on his face, and he doesn't have a nose? whatever it is, because it goes flip, 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 flip between the both of them. Well, this is what happens in films, isn't it? He has no nose. And he's not in front of him. So this whole CGI, all this thing, they've been doing it to us for a very long time. Can't see his face at all. Head is super onto that. I hope you see it, like I do. So in reality, if they're smaller when they're further away, which we'll see a bit of Paul Newman, why is he so big and he's smaller then if he's further away? And these ones, his face looks a little bit strange there, don't you think? Whoops, we've moved across. His face, that looks like that's been like fiddled with, as if you'd have great big grooves like that in your face. And he is more blurred than him, which can't happen. You don't have pictures with someone next to you that's blurred, do you? Yes, I don't know. I don't think that looks right, but I don't. The whole film is like this, see? The whole film is like this. So let's move on. Next picture. There you go. Another one. She is not in front of him. She's still not in front of him, and they're not looking at you. They're not. It's not happening. They've been superimposed in together. Once you realise that, it's so simple. I can't. That's why I've struggled watching films, because you just think these are all. Look, he's not looking at her. He's not there. He's been superimposed in. I mean, oh, and this guy. It's just a bit. Like when you see this stuff, I just can't. I'm just loath to watch it, because we all thought that the end of the TUC area, because the Second World War was actually the end, the First World War started it. This area was probably more safe and the films were real and everything, but it's just the same. How could they nearly 100 years ago do all this? But do we see this person? To me, he looks, not his voice, not his hair, but he looks a bit like Paul Newman, just another version of Paul Newman when you look at that boy. And you see that, his nose, look at the noses. And the eyes. They're very alike. When you actually look at their faces, the mouths, the nose and the eyes, they are very, very alike, because we all know they play other parts. When you look at his eyes, the nose and the mouth, that's all they want to do this AI CGI crap composite thing where everything seems to be a cartoon, including this film made nearly 100 years ago. They look very alike, because you just got to take the hair away. And I thought that was quite interesting, that when you look at Paul Newman's features and that guy, except the hair, they look quite alike. Yes. Anyway, it may not be, but he's obviously a look-alike. Anyway, see that one? So, look at the size of Paul Newman now. Do you see he's smaller? Because he's got to be smaller because he's further away, but he's been superimposed into the footage, is why he looks so small compared to him. The other one doesn't look quite so small, does he? They're the same distance away, but you see, you cannot see Paul Newman's face, and they're superimposed in. I don't know how they do it. I don't know why they do it. I just don't. Maybe it makes the film look better for them, because I just don't know. You imagine they can't move their heads. The heads aren't moving when they're showing you those shots. They never move. We don't realise they don't move. I don't know how he gets the gun from him, but as they've got all those effects, they can do it. See, no nose. He's superimposed in. Superimposed in. He's got no nose. I don't quite know how they do this. How they pass things over, but if they can do the rest, then they can do that. See, that's his wife. But she's not really standing in front of him, talking. This is a set. I don't know how they do it. See, you can't see his nose. at all, or any of his features, just a bit of his cheek. So again, they're not together. He's not looking at her. I just think it's all bananas, personally. Well, that bit there looks a bit strange. They've obviously done something there. And when we go over to her, look, she's got that line round her face. No nose at all. How do you even know it's her? Look at her ear. Look at that. What the hell is that? She's superimposed in. Superimposed into the footage. And he also has a line going on round his face, and I don't think that looks very good. That looks touched up as well. But once you take his hair away, now, do you see Paul Newman more? Anyway, thanks for watching my video. What's your thoughts? The other day, I had this hangout with Angel, and we were talking about static electricity, and even if it wasn't quite the same as the experiments that were being shown, Angel felt that the Giza pyramids were harnessing static electricity, and that they had it back when they were using the pyramids. Now, James sent me this after he watched it, saying that there was arcing swords used in shows in London in the 17th and 18th century. So it just added to my video that I was making today about jousting, because they have a lance, but even that's all crazy. We'll just go through the pictures, because obviously here we go. So this is Arthur's sword. Now it's supposed to be mythical, but the Charlemagne family in France have one of the swords. And those are the swords. Now I thought that Arthur only had one, and it was called Excalibur. But Excalibur is a French word. Arthur was French, not English. Well, he's definitely mentioned in France, let's put it that way. And how could that be if he was supposed to be some sort of king here? But those are his swords. So they had to have had some qualities if they could be used like this. One of the swords can go into rock, you know, and I was wondering whether it was the same thing that James was talking about. That, with the arcings. So obviously they had a lot better understanding about what was going on in their environment than we do. But anyway, that's who the sword is related to, the Charlemagne family. And they are French, and they are in the royal family of the French. But you see, when you look up the word Excalibur, comes from the old word escabalior, which comes from the medieval Latin word Caliburnus, which comes from the Welsh word cladi, whatever that is. I can't speak Welsh. Even though I'm half Welsh, I can't speak it. But there you go, and you think it's all relating back to the French. I thought that was quite amazing. And that Excalibur is a French word. I mean, that is all over our history, and it's a French word. Anyway, so I started looking up a bit about jousting. So it's a game. Jousting is a physical, brutal, grueling sport. Obviously with very heavy armour. On horseback, 2 knights with lances for a tournament. So basically they've got you believing that they had like just a spike on the end, even though it was called a lance, and that these were to kill people. But when you actually look up information about jousting, the ends were blunted so that they didn't actually kill people. It was a competition. This is crazy, right? So the jousting goes back to 1154, And the Pope's talking about it there. You're like, wow, back that far? So obviously, what is a jousting pole? But they're making it look like it had a spear on the end. Oh, look at this. Jousting originated in the Roman era, but became what we know as it today during the reigns of Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. Look, I'm really sorry, everybody. Henry VIII and Elizabeth I were part of the Roman Empire. We've never got rid of the Romans. They've always been here. So he might be Henry VIII in this country and she was Elizabeth I in this country, but you'll probably find that a lot of the kings and queens had other countries, just like Prince Philip was Prince of Greece and Prince of, oh gosh, what is it, Denmark or whatever it is. He had two countries, which if he'd been king of would have made him a bit of an emperor. We've never got rid of it. And don't forget, Prince Philip and the Queen, because they're cousins, are Romanovs. Romanovs. So they just changed the words a little bit, but all back to the Roman era. I thought, oh no, not again. Everything relates back to these bloody Romans, and they're still here, and they're still running us today. They've just changed their names a little bit so that you don't realise, like the Roman Empire turned into the British Empire. Same thing, just changed its name. Anyway, I thought that was quite incredible. Linking it to the Roman Empire, and they still carried on even though they were a different dynasty, but they're not because they're part of the same dynasty. Anyway, it said it was basic. It started to fall from favour in the 1600s because basically they had gunpowder now, you know, bombs and things like that they could do, and fire things. So the armour wasn't needed anymore. So they got rid of the jousting and they got rid of the armour. But when you look, see, he's got a big lump hole. It hasn't got a spike on the end, but they never would have had spikes because they weren't to kill. It was all about competitions. This one explains that Henry VIII fell off his horse and hurt himself. Some of them, you could fold them up and take them with you. But imagine the weight of the suit and then the lancer. See, they have not got spikes on the end because they weren't for killing people. They were all about competitions. Now in films, it's all about killing people. But when you look up information, it's about having a competition. Yeah, these are some of the weights of things. I think there might even be a Roman one in here as well, because I thought, yes, has to, you know, even when you're not talking about the Romans, they seem to slip in the internet. So they had quite a lot of armour and the stick. They probably just sat there and they just pointed the stick because they couldn't really do much else. But I think it explains in here in a minute about the shape of the lance. But in your mind, you always think that it's to do with killing people, but it wasn't. It was a competition. And they had these competitions, supposedly. But it just made me think, with James's question about the swords being arced, that if they had that back then, they probably had it here. So this is saying gunpowder weapons took over, so you didn't need the knights. Gunpowder, the armoured suits, obsolete. There it is. About the same weight as the other ones. It's all part of the same thing. And most people know that that suit of armour, when you look at it, there's no way you can do anything in it. You can't turn your neck. You can't do all sorts of things because it's such an awkward thing. And yet before that, they were wearing like chainmail kind of armour which protected them, and then they turned it into this hideous looking thing, all heavy and that. But maybe that was because they just used that for the jousting. I don't even get this, because at one point the armies were wearing just this, just that as armour, and it was enough to protect them. Okay, maybe some of the weapons changed, but that protected them. And then you do see pictures of these people with chainmail and armour on top. There's another one. What's that one down there? Let's have a look. Well, there's one over here, but there you go. He's got, well, he's Chinese, that one. Let's go over here. There's another one. Oh, come on. So they've got bits of armour around the chainmail. But don't you think it's incredible that this was enough to protect you, the chainmail, right? This was enough to protect you. I mean, having that much chainmail on you must have weighed something, but it's much lighter than wearing this. And then they go from the chainmail to that. But I mean, if you look at the suit of armour, the body is completely protected, maybe from an arcing sword, an arcing lance, who knows, but that's what I tried to make the video about. And then James said it about the 16th and 1700s, 17th, 18th, yeah, the other way around. I never get that when they're talking about they're calling it the 18th century, but it's the 1700s. I think that's really weird myself, but yeah. And then we go into that. But you know, I showed you the video with Angel about the fact that if you're inside something and protected, it's okay when the arcing happens. So maybe they understood all that to have suits of armour like that. Not much has changed. You've still got lances and everything, but they're wearing that. After that, they had bombs and everything, and lancing and all those things became redundant, obsolete. But I still just think it's all crazy, don't you? That basically jousting was for tournaments, but they used it in combat. But they were using it anyway in combat, so that's all weird. Anyway, we'll show that in a little bit. And there it is. It fell out of favour in the 16th century again there. So, let's have a look at this one. Jousting is physically brutal. Each jouster wears up to 100 pounds of armour and can expect to be hit by a lance weighing 15 to 25 pounds carried by a rider atop a 1,500 pound draft horse that is galloping at approximately 30 miles an hour. So it was obviously a rough sport, but have you watched rugby and been on the sideline? That's a pretty rough sport as well. What does that say? So that's just explaining that Henry was injured, another person injured. It was dangerous because obviously they are pointing a lance at you. That one's saying that you had to be born, if you wanted to be a knight, you had to be born into it. Well, that's the Roman thing, isn't it? A little bit more. Oh, this is it. Look at the size of the horses. Typically used range from Shetland ponies to the smallest children to the quarter horses. But look at the size of them. We're going to the next one now. The next picture will tell you. Come on. Because I've recorded this obviously and then I'm speaking over the top. There you go. Look at that. That is what they're saying the size of the horses were. They were 4 foot 10 inches. That's not that tall. They're not great big enormous horses. So that's incredible, isn't it? Who would have thought that? They were pony-sized, modern standards. Of course, this is the kind of... So that's crazy, isn't it? The ponies or the horses weren't very big. And this is the kind of armour that they've got on. The horse couldn't even get to 30 miles an hour with all that on it. With all that weight. I mean, they have to be trained, the horses, because of noises, banging, friction, all sorts of things. So the horse can cope with all of it. I mean, just look at some of the armour. It's just incredible that they'd be wearing that on a horse. See, like, you can't move. It's just in position so that they could do the jousting. There you go. Now, were weapons rounded off during jousting tournaments for safety. Weapons were often blunted before fights in order to prevent serious injury. So they're not what you think they are. They were just for tournaments. I'm glad that the internet sometimes disagrees with the Romans. Probably will change now because I've noticed it, but King Henry II of France died in a jousting accident there. And then there's ways of holding it, tilting it, and what it means. What it was is I was just watching a film last night. It was called, let's have a look at this one. It was called The Last Joust. It was about, it had Matt Damon had married this woman and someone raped her, and she stood up and she said, "He raped me." So her husband had to defend her, and if he lost, she was guilty, and if he won, she was innocent, which is just ridiculous, isn't it? But basically, if she lost, basically all these horrible things were going to happen to her, and they would burn her at the stake. And she just had a baby, but she wanted to carry forward, and it was a gruesome fight. Her husband won, and then she ended up having the life she wanted with her little boy. But they're using it as, it's a weapon, but it was a competition, so that the jousts were never had pointed ends on. That would be a spear, and lances aren't that. So that just talks about what's the difference between a lance and a jousting lance. So there you go. They were made for competitions. Now I thought it was more to do with fighting, but you know, this is how they killed each other off, or part of it. But it wasn't. It was about competitions. You see there? Look, this one here. So they want to show you that a lance looks like this, but it wouldn't have done. I think we have another picture coming up. So this was on that site there. So it didn't have a pointy top like that. It had one like that, which would have caused obviously a bit of damage, but maybe not life-threatening, because it wasn't about killing the opponent with the lances. It was about knocking them off their horse, which is probably obvious, isn't it? But you always think, well, someone's going to die because they're having a fight and they lance each. Oh, that's it, he's dead. But what it was is they'll say that this will knock them off their horse, and then after that, because a lot of the poles broke, you know, the lances broke, that basically they would get a sword out and finish off. But I was still wondering whether all this stuff was arced. How do we know now that all this stuff wasn't part of it? I don't know. It's just with King Arthur's swords, then the fact James says things are arced back in the 17th, 18th century, so that had to be the 1700s. That kind of made sense, maybe. Maybe that's why they wore all that metal. Faraday cage? I don't know. There you go, look. There you go. It had a ball or a blunt end to provide striking surface which hopefully would not cause injury. Later lances would be either of softer wood or be weakened so that they would break on impact, as the point of the latter medieval joust shifted from unhorsing an opponent to seeing how many lances the two could break. A battle lance was made of stiff hard wood and had a sharp point which was intended to cause injury. So they've changed their mind there. But well, after telling you that it was a gruesome sport and competition, it says here, when I put in what is a battle lance, it says a battle lance is a long, sharp spear-like weapon used by cavalry soldiers in mounted combat. So there they're saying that it was used in combat. A long wooden shaft with a sharp metal point. Thrusting weapon used by cavalry soldiers in mounted combat. Used by ancient Assyrians and Egyptians, and Egyptians, and widely used by the Greek and the Romans. Wow. Longer, thicker and heavier than an infantry spear, often equipped with a van plate to prevent the hand from slipping up the shaft. held with one hand over the head grip. Lancers often carried swords, axes or maces for hand-to-hand combat. Sounds horrible, doesn't it? A leading weapon in cavalry charges during classical and medieval warfare. Well, it stopped in the 1600s. It was there in the 1100s. The word lance comes from the Roman word lancia, which was referred to a javelin or a spearing throw. The English verb to launch comes from the same term. I've obviously put in, what is a battle lance? When was it used? So here it says it's used by them, the Greeks and the Romans, which is before horses and medieval and jousting, which did not appear till the 6th century, but it's used by them. Before it was jousting. So it's not called jousting here, but the lance was used when the British defeated or were retreating or against retreating Boers at the Battle of that one on the 21st of October 1889. So this one says, what is the difference between a jousting lance and a war lance? Instead of the sharp tip of the war lance, a jousting lance has a blunt tip with a wider impact surface, putting more force into the impact on the shield rather than impaling the opponent. The tip of the lance is made from a metal and is usually in the shape of a first or three-prong flared out from the centre. So that's for jousting. But the war lance is already being used, so they just changed it a bit into jousting. So then it goes back to medievals, and obviously there you go, the Vikings had lances. So there you go. What's your thoughts to all that? They were competitions. It probably was all that was, but who knows? Because if they could arc electricity in those days, then they're obviously a lot more advanced, because we don't go around with things that are arced, do we, using them. That talks about the hussars there, but anyway, this was because I'd showed James that video, and that's all to do with the pyramids. Because Angel thinks that they were arcing electricity in the pyramids. Anyway, what's your thoughts to all that with jousting? Watch the video, tell me what you think, and leave your comments below. And don't forget, sub to the channel if you're not subbed.